Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Sarah Montague. My guest today is one of the big beasts of British politics. Known as the Father of the House because he's the longest-serving member of the Commons, he's also held more cabinet posts than any other living British politician. And yet, Ken Clarke says we are now in the maddest situation of his lifetime and talks of a political system that is broken. It's one of the reasons he couldn't quite bring himself to retire at the last election, staying on to fight against Brexit and for the Conservative Party. Is it a fight he can win? Ken Clarke, welcome to Hard Talk.
Glad to be here.
Now, you have served under 4 Prime Ministers, Heath, Thatcher, Major, Cameron, and yet you say that we are now in the maddest situation. What do you mean by that?
Well, because it's so chaotic and unpredictable, no one's planned it, we got here by accident. No one thought, for example, that Leave would win the referendum campaign. Neither side did. Nigel Farage was as amazed as David Cameron to find that he'd won. Nobody planned for it. Both the political parties lost their traditional political support, or large parts of it, and they have an activist organisation which doesn't represent their vote. So voting patterns suddenly collapse. You have an election which produces no result whatever, instead of giving Theresa May being majority. We win old mining towns like Mansfield and North East Derbyshire in my part of the world, but we lose Kensington and we lose Canterbury to the Labour Party. So let me sum it up. Anybody who tells you, in my opinion, but anybody who tells you that they know what's going to happen in British politics over the next 12 months is deceiving themselves. It's impossible to predict.
Would you like to see another UK-wide vote, either on leaving the EU or indeed on the deal when it's done?
Well, I hope I never live to see another referendum held on any subject that anybody thinks should be given any constitutional force. It is an absurd way of running a modern, complicated country. It's particularly so when you have a big, broad brush, yes-no question, should we leave, should we stay? Within it are hundreds of complex sub-questions of things that will be affected by that. You have a stupid 3 or 4 week campaign where both sides seem to change nonsense.
You hate referendums so much that having made the mistake,
parliamentary majority democracy.
You think it was a mistake to have had one, but having had that one and acting on it, you wouldn't say it should go back to the country, either to sign off on the deal or to have a second vote on the question itself?
Well, if the Remainers were to win next time, presumably would you have to shake hands and agree, let's try best of 3. These are serious issues about the better governance of the country, about the well-being and prosperity of my children and my grandchildren, and I believe in parliamentary democracy taking considered, grown-up decisions.
But it's quite an interesting thing you say. You will get a vote, as an MP, you will get a vote next year. You were the only Conservative MP to vote against Article 50, the article that triggered the UK's exit from the EU. Will you vote against any deal, whatever it looks like?
No. I made it clear that I accept that the Parliament has decided. I mean, the referendum was advisory, in my opinion. That's what the British Constitution says. Politically, a lot of people have signed up to it, but I haven't. The Parliament, by a big majority, decided to leave. The Article 50 process has started. We might stop it, but I don't think the political class could possibly screw themselves up in this country into trying to stop it. So, in my opinion, given my personal values, we are doomed to leave.
Indeed. But so there will be a deal on the table, possibly. There may not be, but there will be a vote. So will you vote in favour of that deal?
If it's a good deal? If it's a bad deal, we still have to decide what sort of vote we get. I see myself politically, let me sum it up, give you a short answer for a change. I see myself as joining those trying to minimise the damage and get the best possible outcome of this undesirable situation, does the least damage to the future political standing of this country in the world and to our economy. Now, we still have to sort out what kind of vote Parliament's going to have. And I want a meaningful vote, which is the phrase we all use. By that, I think, the government must, when it's finished negotiating, get the approval of Parliament before it ratifies the deal. And if Parliament rejects it, then in my opinion, you go back to the negotiating table and see if you can negotiate something which you can get through the British Parliament.
OK, but, and this is where it's different from the Article 50 vote, we could be in a situation where you are voting against the government, your own government, which is effectively a vote of no confidence. And if other people voted as you would want them to, i.e. you were unhappy with the deal, the government could fall. And I just wonder if you're in a situation where you're more fearful of leaving the EU under certain terms than you are of a Labour government, a Jeremy Corbyn Labour government.
It won't bring the government down. They had all this rubbish when I've voted against the government several times already. I mean,
sure, but if
I
there's a
voted
deal
with the government I think slightly more times than against it on European issues. Nobody bothers to notice that.
Indeed, but if there is a deal after
didn't bring the government down.
Could Theresa May...
It would be difficult then, unless she couldn't then negotiate a revision to the deal which enabled us to continue. It all depends on the circumstances at the time, which no one can foresee. We now have a 5-year fixed-term Parliament Act. We have a Conservative... The only thing all Conservative MPs agree upon is they don't want an election. Someone's got to try to turn this vote into a confidence vote. Not all votes are confidence votes.
No, but given the circumstances of that one, I'm trying to imagine if there are circumstances...
That's a big one. Yes,
because you will know that part of the consequence, you might not like the deal that's on the table, but by voting against it, you are also inflicting...
Yes, that would be a serious vote. And it's possible, but it all depends on the circumstances. It might lead to a change of Prime Minister, which I don't personally want.
And it might lead to a change of government.
The judgment that Parliament has got to exercise is, does it give is it going to give the government of the day approval for this particular deal? I mean, nowadays, all events of this kind are surrounded by far more hysterical, entertaining nonsense in the reporting about the personalities.
You're the one who
what
points
matters
out
is what arrangements are we allowing the government to put into place for the future of this country.
But you're the one who points out that Conservatives do not want another election, and part of that is that they currently don't have a majority. Do you think a Conservative Party, as things stand, could win another election?
Well, if we had another election now, it would be an even bigger gamble than another referendum. I have no idea. The public would be absolutely appalled if the political class called another election. But they don't like, at the moment, the public don't like either of the political parties. They're hostile to the
but the reason I'm asking is particularly about the state of the Conservative Party at the moment.
Well, both parties are in a frightful mess.
Yes, but it's
and
the
the public attitudes towards them totally unpredictable.
Indeed, but the Conservative Party, if it had to fight another election, we learned from John Strafford, who's chairman of the Campaign for Conservative Democracy, that the membership, he reckons, is about 70,000. We don't know figures because they haven't given figures for 4 years. Does that makes about sense to you, that 70,000 figure?
Well, it's membership, certainly the smallest and, on average, the oldest in my entire political career, yes.
And
I don't quite bring back down the average age when I go to meetings, but I still do not feel out of place. And there are many, many fewer people.
And we should explain, we're comparing with a Labour Party that has 500,000 members as of last summer.
But they have a mass membership of young lefties who are totally unrepresentative of their generation as well. Both sides' activists do not represent the people who vote for them.
Indeed, and as far as the Conservatives are concerned, Queen Mary University did some research, Professor Tim Bale behind it, and said nearly half the Conservative Party members are over 65, 2/3 are men, 9 out of 10 are middle class. And that's the difficulty for the Conservative Party, which you know so well, and you've known at different stages of its fortunes.
I firmly fit I tick all those boxes myself, but and there's a range of opinions amongst such people. But yes, I think everybody in the Conservative Party knows that we've got to look back to what we can do to get back to younger people joining as activists in our party and actually get back to winning the support of young people electorally, because the referendum in particular, but the general election was roughly the same, divided the generations to a bizarre extent. And there are plenty of people under the age of 50 who ought to be natural Conservatives because of their approach to life, they're entrepreneurial, they're doing quite well in their jobs, all that, aspirational. They were all voting Labour. We were winning aged, disappointed, disgruntled, white working class men in old industrial towns in the north. Now, leaving aside the social differences, I want a broad-based support, we must attract the sort of people in the younger generation who would benefit from our approach to government.
People like you used to be. Would a young Ken Clarke today join the Conservatives?
I have no idea. That's a kind of difficult question I've been asked before. Yes, I think I might. I mean, my views, I have always been driven by my views. I mean, I'm a free market economics, I believe, but combined with a social conscience. It does have to be regulated and run for the benefit of everybody. I'm an internationalist, I'm pro-European. I just...
well, and you're, to use your own words, impeccably working class. You make the point...
Impeccably working class and origins, but I believe in meritocracy and social mobility. I don't normally make such a great deal of that, but it was kicking off the start of my book, which I started with my working class origins, yes.
And I just wonder what there is about the Conservative Party. I mean, that you, as a younger man, if you were now, you make the point why the young people who would have voted Remain, as indeed would you, why they would be attracted to the Conservative Party.
Well, I think the Conservative Party's got to make itself more attractive. I mean, I was attracted because it was then the modernising, forward-looking party. The post-war politics and the post-war position of Britain had atrophied. It was hopeless, and we became a bit of a laughingstock after Suez and so on. And so droves of young people like me all joined the Conservative Party because of the modernising thing they were doing. Now, at the moment, the public are even more cynical and disillusioned with politics than I say young people were with traditional politics in the 1960s.
And they live in a very different...
And so again, we should take on ambitious ideas of modernising the country, adjusting quickly enough to the opportunities of the globalised economy, actually sorting out our place in the world. How do we, nowadays, defend our interests and our values in wider politics? How do we make sure that we get our population into modern industries that can thrive?
Indeed, and on those values of one nation conservatism, which is something that you've always espoused. You're president of the Tory Reform Group. I mean, it's the
shorthand cliché phrase for
which sort of stands for uniting citizens around the idea that they have an obligation to each other.
Uniting in addressing the needs of all social classes and the whole nation and all that. Yeah.
Is it dead?
No, it's not dead. I think a very large number of the public are attracted by it. It's not being mobilised very well. Politics is becoming polarised, becoming dominated by protest. It's becoming absolutely dominated by short-term media hysteria. This isn't your programme, but you know, the worst of the media, not the best of the media. And
but it is something
we need to go back to getting a grip
that senior politicians...
what is each party for, what is it seeking to deliver, and I would be attracted, and am attracted, by the party that's most likely to deliver the kind of one nation things you were just talking about.
And is your party that party at the moment?
I think it is. It could be made so, but it's gone through a bad period. Let's face it, both parties have taken a terrible battering. Europe has been the poison in the system for about 25 years because it hopelessly divides both parties. The idea that either party is remotely united on the subject of Europe, or could be made so, is ludicrous.
No, but that's a separate issue.
So you've got to get on to other things, have policies and other things.
Because it was after the referendum that Theresa May, the Prime Minister, stood outside Downing Street and gave what many people would say was a one-nation speech, talking about the just about managing...
I agree with every word.
You agreed with every single word. And I just wonder is there any evidence of that being reflected in what she's done in the 18 months since?
That's what we need. Here I entirely agree with you. That was a splendid aspiration. That was a splendid vision of what the party's for this Parliament. What we now need is the policies, and the implementation of the policies will enable us to demonstrate we've stretched that. Well, what's happened so far is not adequate, and we're not going at an adequate pace.
Is there anything you would point to that you would say that's following through? She is.
On social aspiration?
Yes, on the things that are important to you.
And also she was going on about the excesses of capitalism and the people left behind and so on. She has addressed that in the last few days. She has, I mean, just topically, she has started talking about dealing with people who take excessive pay out of their company when the company is doing badly.
Indeed,
or pay no regard to the pension rights of their workers.
But
I agree, that's only a beginning.
Months on,
that's a tiny beginning.
And one of the reasons she may have talked about it the other day is that we know from the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development that, and the High Pay Centre, the average FTSE 100 chief executive took home in the first 3 days of this year the salary of an average worker.
Corporate pay, generally, I mean, I'm in the minority, I think, of Conservatives in thinking this, but not alone. But corporate pay has become a farce since the 2000s.
What would you do?
I was a chairman of a remuneration committee of several companies in the 2000s. We were in opposition. And I got embarrassed by what the consultants were urging me and my colleagues to pay to excellent chief executives who were working with.
So what would you do about it? Here we are, we're talking about Theresa May stands out, says she's going to deal with things.
If shareholder democracy doesn't work and I give shareholders more power, I make their votes binding, then we do need to see what can be done to check pay being given by way of bonus when the company's performances don't justify it, no mathematical justification for it, or when the payment of the executives is continuing to soar away and the company is performing very badly. Now, if I was back in the government, the Department of Business and Treasury should be working on mechanics for that, and also I am a lawyer, but the legal challenges of that.
You make the point when I ask you.
But that's the field I would open up, and then you've got to produce something compatible with free market economics.
When I ask you about what Theresa May has done, you point to something she said after 18 months. The likes of one of your fellow MPs, Nick Bowles, Ed Vaizey, Sarah Wollaston, all have talked about her timidity, a timidity and lack of ambition about Mrs May's government, which means it constantly disappoints, says Nick Bowles.
Well, they're all people I quite often agree with, as it happens,
you agree with him
young
on
members.
That?
But no, on this occasion, I think they're unfair to attribute that just to Theresa and her personality. The fact is, Brexit is the elephant in the bath. It is dominating the political life of a nation to an extraordinary extent. It's difficult to see how you escape from that. It is going to be the giant requirement of a government to deliver something on Brexit for the next 2 years, and the Conservative Party hasn't yet sorted itself out over what compromise it's going to agree to pursue.
So everything else gets pushed out.
And she's got to avoid that. They're right to warn her that she's got to stop it all being pushed out. And I suspect if she were here, she would agree in spades. She wants to do something other than Brexit,
which is follow the call by the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson to pay £100 million to the NHS as the Brexit dividend.
Oh, Boris is great for producing personal publicity day by day. It was a bridge over the channel that he was at a summit. That's just an attempt to rescue Boris's reputation from the daft, and in fact inaccurate, dishonest figure he associated himself with in the course of the campaign. And he's obviously read a newspaper and noticed some people are going on about spending on the NHS. That's just a Boris thing. The NHS is
purely for his own purposes, because the NHS needs
the usual purpose of
money.
Getting publicity. The NHS, well, it's got a lot of more money. The question is how much, and you'll never be able to satisfy everybody. When you, as Philip Hammond and Jeremy have been finding, when you put more money into the NHS, nobody gives you slightest credit for it, and in many means the lobbies come back asking for more. I mean, I have been Secretary of State, I have been Chancellor, so it's been like this for years. Now, actually, there is a case for more money for the NHS, because the ageing population means demand is rising and changing. There is a case for not just giving them money, because then it just gets blown, all the pressure gets taken off. Great deal of change in the NHS, and continual striving for higher performance is needed. You have to give that, you know, that is being delivered by the government, actually. And so it's not just a simple question of how much extra the opposition or lobby is now going to say you want after the last lot you gave them. It's what do you do with it. The Treasury can't just throw money about. It does have debt and deficit problems.
So you'd push back on Boris Johnson?
I'd say, which tax do you wish to put up, Boris, or which department are you going to take the money out of in order to give it to NHS? With the serious people, I would say now, given the public are totally resistant to paying any more tax nowadays for anything, which I didn't have quite this problem when I was Chancellor of the Exchequer. They didn't expect all their budgets just to be giveaways of presents to everybody. We probably do need some more revenue. Social care, first of all, and the NHS, particularly as you make the two integrate. That's where you need more money. Where are you going to raise it? How are we going to responsibly raise it, and then how are we going to set about selling to a reluctant public that this is in the public interest,
indeed,
money they've got to pay.
And also a public that feels that is disaffected not just with politics, but also with capitalism. And you make the point that you are, in fact, you're socially liberal, but in economic terms, you have always been at the sort of free markets end of the Conservative Party.
And I've hardly changed my mind. For 40 years, it has delivered the most magnificent improvements in living standards that probably we've seen. And global poverty has fallen by more than in our history. The living standards of the British have surged ahead until the 2007-8
inequality
crash.
And the sense of those who feel they are left behind.
Absolutely,
how do you
that's what we all
that?
neglected. Those of us who were enthusiastically taking part, the great normality of the 1990s, with hindsight, having been reproved by the public, what we ignored at our peril was, this isn't really benefiting everybody.
So what would you do now?
I would now address that question, which she has addressed in speeches.
What would you do?
Well, I've talked about dealing with some of the corporate excesses. I think you've also got to address what are you going to do to switch on the economies of all those areas which the Americans call Rust Belt places. How are you going to get more of the investment, more of the modern industry to go there so steadily they can rejoin the modern world and derive the benefits from the globalised economy, which they can derive like everybody else. But at the moment, a lot of their electors are quite right in saying, look around this town, you're doing nothing for us here.
It was the regions and, in fact, global growth that Jim O'Neill, Lord O'Neill, who's the former chairman of Goldman Sachs, pointed to in saying, actually, I might have got it wrong on Brexit, because he had warned about the trouble for the economy in the short term, as did you.
I didn't warn about trouble with the economy in the short term.
You said the short-term consequences will be quite unpleasant. I cannot tell you how severe, but if the currency collapsed, you'd have a significant increase in interest rates. That didn't happen. That
didn't happen. What did happen was a significant increase in inflation, which meant median wages began to decline. I didn't go in for all the doom watch rubbish. Both, I mean, the national media, the national media, and I don't normally carry on about the media, and I'm sounding like all parts of the government media, but the national reporting of the referendum was as disgraceful as the campaigning by leading parties on each side.
Do you see?
So all they did was report the rubbish on both sides.
In terms of where we are now,
in the longer term, the economy is going to be managed.
Can you see a route through this process where actually the UK, instead of having for years been awkwardly inside the EU, sits comfortably just outside?
Yes, I would go back on the Lancaster House speech. I think we should stay in the single market. I think we should stay in the customs union. I don't think the public were ever told we were leaving them. The Leave campaigners in the referendum actually reassure people that trade would not change. Our relationships would be the same because the Germans had to sell us their Mercedes and the Italians their Prosecco. And what on earth we've decided to leave the single market and the customs union for, I cannot imagine, because the public did not vote for that. No one ever mentioned it to them.
And given that you at one stage were planning to stand down as an MP, but stayed on...
well, that was in 2020, after a full parliament, I thought.
Well, so will you stand down in...
I think this time I will, because the reason I stood last time was, here, the election had come, did I retire 3 years earlier than I intended? Or did I perhaps extend...
So you'll see Brexit through.
And I'm very glad I didn't miss this Parliament, because although it may be chaotic, extraordinary, and you may gather I get, sort of not too angry away, I hope, pretty brassed off with some of the things going on in British politics, the sillier nonsense at the moment. Actually, this Parliament's going to decide some more important questions about the future of this country and the well-being of future generations than practically any I've served in.
Ken Clarke, thank you for coming on Hard Talk.